Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Tia and Jill.
Good morning or hello, good day to everybody.
Yes, we are excited to have you here with us, and we're super excited about our panel today. And the topic we are talking about, DEIB, is, of course, if you've been following us and you've been a part of our LinkedIn, you know this is something that is exciting for us and something that we are passionate about. So we are excited to have this panel today and to talk with you all about it.
Yes. Well, and it's a great topic because, right, food safety culture, say the buzzword, right? We all talk about it, but really at the end of the day, it's like, how are we taking care of people and how do we bring everybody together? And so I'm so excited to have our panelists here to share some new perspectives and what they see happening in the, across the industry and where we can do improvements as well.
Yeah. And this conversation is a follow-up conversation from a QA magazine article that Jill and I authored. And we posted a link on LinkedIn as a part of this event. So if you haven't read it, we invite you to read it after today and share your perspective and your opinions and how you feel about the different topics that we discussed and the different topics we didn't discuss in the article. We would love to hear your feedback. But today, with our panel, we want to know who's out there listening to us, watching us. We can't see you, as you all know, on LinkedIn Live, but we can see your comments. So please say hello in the comments and where you are watching from.
Right. We were just talking behind the scenes that we represent across the United States today with all of our panel members, right?
Yes, we are all in different spaces. And dealing with the wild weather that's happening, particularly on the West Coast.
Yes. And so, as you're joining, if it's your first time coming to Real Talk, welcome. We're so glad you're here. And if you've been here before, thank you for coming back and being part of the conversation. Here at Catalyst, Tia and I, we are on a mission. Our goal is to transform how we lead in food. We do that because we know that when we empower people to live authentically and we take care of them, we can achieve more, which means our businesses get more as well. And so it is a win-win. And we are here to help every single one of you on that mission as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And ensuring you have a diverse group of leaders, right? Workforce, as well as making sure that your culture is inclusive and that people feel like they belong in your culture. All that feeds into culture, food safety culture, how people show up at work, how people get work done, how they're engaged, how you retain people. All the pieces that we talk about probably independently or outside of DEI. DEI impacts those things. And so we're going to talk more about that today. But without further ado, I do want to turn it over to our panelists and have them introduce themselves, how they got into food, and why is this topic so important to you? So we'll start with you, Damarys.
Buenos días. Good morning, Tia and Jill, and good morning to the panelists. So happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. My name is Damarys del Castillo, born and raised in the beautiful island of Puerto Rico, now located in Texas. And I work for Sigma Alimentos with the corporate central quality team as the director of food safety culture and food safety systems for the last 4 years. But I have been around in the industry for almost, let me let you do the calculation, since 1994, okay? So I have been involved in different roles, leading and supporting food safety, quality, regulatory compliance, and wherever I was needed, to be sincere. Why I'm here? I think that most of us, as you know, despite having training, education, and awareness among other initiatives that we may have in our companies, they're not enough to transform behaviors and mindsets. And I think that we need a good soil to plant a seed. We need we need to have something else, and that's what I believe that DEIB gave us. With good initiatives in place to robust the systems that we have, and to contribute to set the environment for a good food safety culture system, as you mentioned at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Well, that planting the seeds.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sure.
That foundation, right? That foundation for culture is important. Well, welcome. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Sarah, I'll turn it to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Reyes. I am from Taylor Farms, Southern California. We manufacture our salad dressings for all your favorite Taylor Farms salads. I've been with the food industry about 5 or so years now. My first experience actually was working with In-N-Out. I was cooking up those burgers, fries, all that good stuff, and then kind of took a break in between. Found my way back into the food world, and I think my foundation was really built there and continued. I found a passion for food, particularly food safety, and then in my current role with regulatory compliance. So I enjoy learning, I enjoy the research, the changes, a little bit difficult, but I enjoy knowing how to continue to keep our food safe. And in regards to DII, it's really important to me, especially as what I like to consider myself still younger generation, where we're coming into a space where DII is still improving. It still needs to have improvement, and to kind of mimic what Damarys said, we have something that we're missing still, something that we need to take the next step forward. And I want to be a part of that. And I think it's almost my privilege to be able to be in this space and to contribute somehow and find that next step, whatever it may be. So DAI, I want to see where it goes, and I want to see future, food safety professionals, or maybe in all industries, feel important and feel like they can show up every day to work and want to be there, and just feel valued.
Yeah. Sarah, I'm glad you brought up that, just where you are in your career, and we'll dive into this a little bit, but even like from a different generation standpoint, right? DEI kind of could mean something different, or interact with how we interact with DEI might be a little bit differently. So we welcome you to the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Larry, I would turn it to you. You've already gotten a shout out from Felix.
No, right, Felix. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Larry Keener, and I have to laugh at Sarah. I joined this industry back in 1977, excuse me. When I left the university and went to work for the National Food Processors Association. You probably know them as GMA nowadays, as a research microbiologist. And believe it or not, guys and gals, this was before food safety. When I started work at the NFPA, I always thought that the National Food Processors Association had their name wrong. I thought they should have been called a National Food Protection Association, because that's what we did. But it wasn't formally called food safety. Dr. Bauman had made his proclamations about food safety some years before, but it was not broadly accepted by the industry as a discipline. I subsequently left the trade association, went to work for Unilever, and ultimately became the first food safety officer or director of food safety for any Unilever business in the world. Wow. I created the first standalone office of food safety for that company. In 1996, 28 years ago this month, actually, I started International Product Safety Consultants, and I've had the good fortune of working with clients in Japan, Korea, Europe, South America. I've been on every continent except for Antarctica, doing work for clients. DE&I, listening to National Public Radio this morning, as is my habit with my coffee and paper, Steve Castillo brought up a very interesting point, and he said that was just this morning, 82% of business executives have for their companies DEI objectives
Hmm.
for their leadership team. I think that says a lot, that you know DE&I is actually about outcomes. It's about business. It's about businesses succeeding, and that's why I'm here to join this conversation this morning.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your background too. Because if there's people that don't know you, which I can't imagine someone not knowing you, but for people that may not know you, just your experience around food safety and like what you talked about, where it wasn't even a standalone before, right? And kind of watching that evolution. So I appreciate that. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And Jason, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Hey, hi everybody. My name is Jason Brill. I'm the editor of QA Magazine, the magazine that was happy to publish the story that T and Jill wrote about this topic. How I got into the industry was a few years ago. I joined QA Magazine, and that's how I got into the industry, reporting on the industry and sharing best practices from all of the sources that we work with. And stuff like that. I've been in magazine publishing for about 14 years. Previously, I'm based in Cleveland, Ohio, so I previously worked at our city and regional magazine, Cleveland Magazine, just covering lifestyle topics and places to shop and places with the best cupcakes, stuff like that. But getting over to QA Magazine has been really interesting, just to learn about this industry. And I think it seems kind of endless how far down the rabbit hole you can go on some of this stuff. So it's been pretty cool to learn about. And then, as far as the story, the backstory on this DEI and DEIB story is last January, February, we published a cover story about influential people in food safety over the last 30 years. And the list was very white. It had a lot of white people. It had all white people. And that was something that we acknowledged and we knew, and we tried to acknowledge it in an editor's column. But that wasn't really enough. And Tia, you had voiced your concern about it. And we immediately hopped on a call with you and said, okay, how can we fix this? How can we make this better? And, so we added some more people to that list and made some more promises to try to cover more diverse topics and include more diverse sources. And I think we did that last year, and we're going to continue to do that. And honestly, it was something that we had always wanted to try to make sure we did before, but we failed in that one respect. And so I think we always would have wanted to do this story. It just last year was the right time to do it. And we were really happy that the two of you could write it and that we could publish it and share this really great story. There are several things that go into what make a really great magazine story, whether it's a trade publication or a lifestyle magazine or a gossip magazine, right? You want a story to have some kind of tension, and that keeps the reader engaged. And that tension could be, how can I do XYZ better in food safety? Or that tension could be, hey, that there's a diversity, equity, and inclusion aspect missing, or it could be better. And then there's practical takeaways that should be in every great magazine story, and then maybe something that you learn that's new. And I think that this story has all of those things. It sets up the tension of either companies that have these initiatives or don't, or need to grow them, there's great takeaways in here and best practices on how to build food safety culture while keeping an eye on diversity and some of these things. You know, Sarah and Damarys were sources in this story and shared some great insight on what they do at their companies. And then that idea of the belonging, adding DEI to adding the B to DEI, like just for me, like that was something really cool to learn. So I think the story really has sort of everything that you want to be really engaging.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Thank you for your introduction and also the backstory behind it. And if you have not read the article, I'm going to shout it out again. Like, please read it, because like what Jason said, it does have all those things. But what we love most about it is that it starts the conversation, right? And it's a part of having these conversations. And Jason, you alluded to this as you were talking about even expanding the circles at QA Magazine and having different conversations. And one great thing about Jason and the QA Magazine team is that they're extremely transparent about the things that they're doing, that they're passionate about, right? To draw attention to DEI, DEIB in the space. So I appreciate the work that you all are doing. And I appreciate you creating spaces to have conversations. And I appreciate you being here today to be a part of this conversation.
I'm happy to be here. I've watched you guys so many times, and now I'm a little starstruck seeing it from this end. So
we are happy you're here. We're happy you're here. So let's talk a little bit about just the impact of DEIB. So each of you have kind of explained like how you got into the industry. You know, you've been working in your respective spaces for many years. When you think about the DEIB efforts at organizations that you work with or that you have worked alongside with, not necessarily in your experience, how has DEIB impacted you and even your career?
So can I take the lead on this one? And I think I take the lead because history is important, and you know, having worked in this industry for nearly 50 years, you know, I have some history. And so I think, you know, coming from a an affirmative action kind of a background, and that's what DE&I was called before it was called DE&I. It was called affirmative action. And I was an awardee or a beneficiary of affirmative action because I was a Vietnam veteran. So when I came out of the military, the public sector sought to make accommodations for us to ease us back into society. So part of the affirmative action was to create mechanisms for taking these returning soldiers and integrating them back into businesses, back into the workforce, giving us an opportunity to gain an education. So that was kind of affirmative action, and I think that, you know, maybe affirmative action was at work when I was accepted admissions at Berkeley. But, you know, once I got into Berkeley, I still had to write the same exams as all the kids who got in by other means. But anyway, it may have helped. And so that was that iteration. And then Stephen Bakke came and brought a lawsuit against the University of California and said that affirmative action was in fact disenfranchising other people. And so affirmative action went into decline. And so this current edition of this current version, this current iteration of DE&I, if you will, the George Floyd iteration of DE&I. Well, so I think this is probably my third. This is my third cycle with DE&I, and it comes and goes. And as you all know, um, many very important business leaders of our day have said vocally that DE&I needs to go and die. Say that DE&I is racist, and that it has no place in industry or in society. So it looks like we're in another cycle. But I have to take heart on that Stephen Brancasio report again this morning that 82% of the CEOs of businesses across the spectrum say that DE&I remains important. The Supreme Court has said that at Harvard it's not important. The state government of Texas and its universities have said it's not important, and they have prohibited it. So DE&I, we need to make a business case for DE&I. I think if we try and make a moral case for DE&I, we have to realize that morality is normative. You know, what I consider moral is not necessarily what you consider to be moral. But if we make a business case for it, then I think we have a starting place for sustaining it. And again, this morning, this message from Stephen Brancasio on the morning report was very well received.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because like I'm like, wow, 82. What did you say? 82?
82%. 82%. Yeah.
Wow, I think that is, especially with the activity that has happened, which you said a few things that we're going to get into. But, you know, even to think about what has happened with affirmative action, which we've talked about in the article, and just some activity, right, that's happened here in the States, still to hear that 82% is prioritizing DEI, DEIB is positive. And there's a few things I want to dive into a little bit more, Larry, that you brought up. But before we do that, I would love to hear from others on how DEI have impacted you or in your careers.
Yes, I may jump in, and I believe that what Larry was mentioning is so important because it's part of the change of mindsets, right? We also have new leaders, new generations there that are kind of having this different focus on how they're going to be leading their organizations. And I believe it's very important. I believe that we can take it for granted, at least in my opinion. It just relied on what we have implemented for years. We can take that for granted. That is maybe working, but not necessarily it's going to be continually working at the same way. So I believe that just complying with labor laws, and Larry was mentioning a little bit how that, changed over the years. Just complying with that now is not enough. Yeah. We need to really kind of look inside and kind of not oversight that, because that is part of situations that may happen, and it's situations that we have been seeing across the states, right? And maybe not only talking about the food industry, but outside the food industry, we have been seeing that in police departments and other organizations that maybe give services to people. So I believe that if we don't work in a way that could identify those situations, educate ourselves to understand what this means really in this new environment that we're living, we can prevent. We're going to oversight situations, and we are undermining the healthy environment that we need in order to succeed internally in our organizations. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Very good point. Very good point.
Yeah, I think that's important, Damarys, because the systems that have worked for us in the past don't always serve us as we go forward. And Larry, as you talk about that 82% of executives who say DEI is an important initiative, like, are we on the way for helping make that business case? Like you said, it's not just about compliance, but like there are other business reasons because the morality approach doesn't always work.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's also when you were talking about that, Larry, too, and even with Damarys saying like we have to do more. I hear the same type of language that we use even for food safety culture. Like if we're waiting for an organization to get the same morals, right, that we personally might have, like it's probably not going to happen. But we've seen, we know that food safety culture, DEI, all those things are great for business, not just for morality. And obviously, because it's good for people, right? And people in your organization, it's also good for people because that's when you start seeing higher levels of engagement and retention and all those things, right? That kind of pull or add to the bottom line.
So making the business case is important. I've always said that, and I've written that about food safety culture too, is that you need to make a business case and highlight the value proposition that is food safety culture. I've written about it and talked about it until I'm blue in the face, but it's the same with DE&I. There's a value proposition there, and that value proposition needs to be highlighted. And that's what we need to talk about when we talk about advancing DE&I in a corporate structure where the motivation is profit, earning money, that you are there to lend your shoulder, your expertise, your training, your knowledge to enable that company to be successful. That's the kind of language we need to talk.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, one of the things, Larry, you brought up was around affirmative action. And I mentioned that we talked about affirmative action and just the reversal of affirmative action, particularly around education in the US. And Sarah, you made a comment around just education in DEI. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about that and the impact that DEI has, even from an education standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. So in the article, I talked a little bit about educational equity and access. And where I feel that falls into the place with DEI is that, you know, we have employees and, you know, amongst our workforce that come from all different backgrounds. And I think we've recognized that how we're supporting them is different. We want our teams to be successful. And I think to kind of connect with Larry's point is that we're trying to make a business, or we need to make that business case. And to make that business case, we need to understand our workforce and where they come from. And the truth and the reality of it is that a lot of our workforce hasn't had a lot of the same access that others may have, or we're still working with workforces that may never get there. And it's because of historically deprived groups who didn't have that access. And so what I want to really highlight in that article, or wanted to highlight, was that there's so much diverse talent in our workforce that maybe just hasn't had the same opportunities. And my concern is that if we don't, it sounds like, and with just the experience that Larry shared and Damarys in their history, is that it's been a long time. And we're still kind of falling short to how can we support those individuals who might not always have the same opportunities? What are we doing? Because it is about the people. You know, we can continue to promote and bring up individuals into these roles, but how are we doing it to sustain their successes and even get to them to a starting place? And I think it starts with education. It needs to be equitable to everyone, no matter where you come from.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Sarah, and one that, you know, I've even seen, right? Like just growing up in my neighborhoods, right? And even from grade school into college, and even afterwards. And so, you know, that education for me, I have a passion around, but it's like that playing field, right? Like if we have access to if everyone has access to education, right, then we're able to accomplish so much more. We know that everyone doesn't have access to education in the same way. Right. And knowing that, right, and acting on that within our organizations is important, like you're saying, Sarah, because it helps you understand the culture that you have, and it also helps you understand how you can support the culture.
Yeah, definitely.
And I may add to that, Sarah, what you mentioned is so important for us as companies to do is to understand our community, what we have, our employees, because it's and we were discussing this before, that not necessarily giving exactly the same thing to everyone is going to work. You need to identify what they need to try to succeed in what they're doing. And it's not giving everything, right? And I was kind of thinking about the analogy of the succulents, right? Too short on water, you dry them. Too much water, you may kill them. So it's just kind of give the right amount of water, right?
It's nurturing it.
Understanding your community, understanding their needs, help you to kind of align, and eventually that is gonna give you, you're gonna get back from that in your operation.
Yeah.
So that makes me think. Excuse me, Tia. That makes me think of, Indra Nooyi is my hero. I mean, her writings and her speeches about DE&I are, very important. And I think that, for posterity, those will be pulled out and rolled out often. And she said that the D in diversity was easy. That that we can succeed in doing that, and that's kind of to Sarah's and Damarys' comments about the workforce. We have diverse workforces. You go into the food industry and you look across from, look across the line, and man, there's all kind of black and brown and yellow people working on the line. So then you can step back and say, well, it's diverse. And Indra said that was the easy part. It was easy to decorate the window, but the real hard work was inclusion. And I think that's what Sarah is alluding to, is that we have these people, and to get the most for the business from these people, we have to do the hard work of inclusion. And that means listening to them, paying attention to what motivates and drives them. So inclusion is the hard work. Equity, we can have a whole nother program about what equity is and what it requires to get equity. But the points about inclusion are very, very well taken and on point.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like, right, all it is, and this sounds like food safety culture too, and it sounds like good leadership, right? It's just meeting people where they are and providing them with these resources. And everyone's different. We're all different. We all learn differently. We all lead, differently. So it's just about meeting people where they are, I think.
Yeah. And that's different depending on who they are. And you have to go and find that, which is what, Jill and I, we talk about this all the time with culture, where you have to have those conversations, and that's the hard work.
Right. It is hard work. It sounds like hard work. It is, but like the value that you get out of that, right? Like,
yeah. One of the things that we talked about in the article, and I want to discuss a little bit right now, is flexible work and microaggression. And I think this really fits in what we're talking about, because when 2020 happened, right, we all went remote because we had to, and companies continued to make money. We continued to work from home, right? As a matter of fact, many industries and many companies had record profits during COVID, and we were all remote at that time. One of the things that has bubbled up as a part of returning back in the office is this whole idea of what works best: remote work, in office. Is it this flexible hybrid situation? And there's data out there, contrary to popular CEO beliefs, there's data out there that shows that people are most effective, engaged, right, when they are able to have flexible work, when their work aligns with what that employee actually prefers. So if an employee prefers to go in the office and the organization allows them to go into the office, they're happy. If a person wants to work from home, they're happy if the organization lets them. If they want to be able to move depending on what they have going on, if the organization allows them, then they are happy. And then what we see is that really, when it's matched, the type of engagement, the type of employees seeking other work, it significantly decreases, right? Engagement increases. People looking for jobs decreases because it aligns with what they need. One thing that kind of came out were these microaggressions. And if you don't know what microaggressions is, the definition is that it's a statement or action or incident regarding as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against a member of a marginalized group. And that could be something like, I'm in a meeting and people keep talking over me, or someone mistakes me as another Black woman in the organization that might be at a different level or a junior level compared to where I am. Those are examples of what microaggression could be. And what they found is that because people were allowed to work from home in 2020, right, 2021, that microaggressions obviously decreased because we're no longer interacting with each other in the office. But then that movement back into work, right, is that people of color was more hesitant to go back into work because they basically realized that there was a lift off their shoulders, that they can get work done without these microaggressions. I don't think maybe we knew microaggressions existed, but the impact of being able to work from home and have this flexible work force, to me, I feel like that was something that just kind of came up, and it was like, oh, of course it makes sense. But like now we have data and we have people talking about how people feel going into the office versus being outside of the office and how they get work done. And when I think about that, I think about how organizations should be responding to that data and shifting the way that they do things based on what their workforce is telling them to do. I would love to hear your thoughts, each of your thoughts around that, either around microaggression or just around how when organizations get this information, like, flexible work, like people love it or not, how are we going to respond to it, right? Like the impact of organizations learning and adopting the things that they kind of discover along the way. I'm curious.
Can I start on this one too? Tia, you said that maybe we didn't know that microaggression existed. Well, we did.
Well, we did.
We long ago knew that it existed. We didn't have very nice language to describe it, and we didn't probably have the book dictionary to describe it, but we knew it. And we knew it well. I'll give you an example. I got when I was working for the National Food Processors Association, I got a troubleshooting job, and this was in the early 80s, late 70s, and it happened to be down in Mississippi and at a food processing plant who was having massive failures with its product. The cans of product were blowing up left and right, and I was sent down to troubleshoot and figure out what was happening. And so I'd show up at the office, the front desk, and the receptionist says, you need to go around to the back door. That's where they're taking applications. And I introduced myself. The woman nearly fell off of her chair, and after she took my card and ran back to the office, and I heard her say, "Hey, there's a black man here from NFPA." The owner of the business came out. He was very cordial, but microaggression. That she was in utter disbelief and disrespect that I would be showing up to help them solve a major business problem. It was just that's microaggression at a level that, well, we should add that to the canon, I suppose.
Right.
But yes, Tia, I had to push back on that. We knew it existed and we lived it, and um, we adjusted.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't adjust, you would be left on the curb.
Yeah. 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 Wow. What an impactful story. Jason, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tia, go ahead.
I wasn't sure if Jason, were you going to add a comment?
Well, I was just gonna say, I'm glad you said that, Larry, because like that's the first thing that I kind of thought of too, right? It's always been there. We just didn't have a definition for it yet. Kind of like food safety was always there. It just didn't have a term yet. Food safety culture was always there. We just didn't have a term yet. When you're able to analyze these things and apply terms to them, easier is not the right word, but it makes it something that you can then work on, right? If there's no definition for it, if you just pretend it's not there, we can't get any better on it. So yes. All of these things, by giving them or by discovering these definitions, I think that helps you, attack. It's not the right word, but it's the only thing I'm coming up with right now.
Yeah, that's what we need to do. We need to attack it. Yeah. Because otherwise, if we don't attack it, it's not going away.
Right. Damarys.
Yes, I was thinking about myself, right? That having the opportunity of working in a flex environment allowed me to work with a team that is located in Mexico, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it works perfectly having this kind of flexibility, but at the same time, I was thinking about the microaggression that you were mentioning, and Larry mentioned now that it is something that, in my experience, sometimes you need to face it, right? You are going to hide it, having this flex work maybe because you are, now it's heaven open. I don't need to deal with this toxic coworker or whatever, right? In a office environment, but then you are not working with that at the same time. So you need to kind of be open to face it and find a solution because it's not going to get away. It's going to stay there. And yes, flex work allows to kind of get out of that environment and take time from our minds, kind of thinking on things that are not work because we're thinking about maybe something that is affecting us in our work environment. But then you need to really face it and find a solution and kind of confront, right, this microaggression that may happen. For example, I'm Hispanic. I have an accent talking. So there's people that have those microaggressions sometimes. And I'm not saying my company, but other places. You go and try to talk. And for example, I was in a drive-through asking for something, and I was talking my perfect English, but he just insists that he doesn't understand me. And I feel bad. Really, I was thinking, well, what's happened here? I'm gonna not get what I need. So I had to go to the window to ask for my order directly because he insists that he doesn't understand me. But in reality, I noticed that he had this kind of microaggression that he was kind of, he didn't want to understand.
Right.
And those things,
Right.
sometimes we need to face those things.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. You know, it impacts, you know, not just at work, but daily life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'll add a little bit to that, also to that, you know, I think I've been a part of that group who hasn't stopped going into office since COVID. You know, luckily there's been instances where I've had that opportunity to work from home, you know, those few one-off days. And I found it, you know, really beneficial in those moments that I needed it. And I think our article, you talk a lot about that flexibility, right? And showing that we're still able to be successful and drive the same output that is expected of us, regardless of where you're at. And I hear that flexibility in work does kind of what I was talking about. The opportunities can be available. It's just how is our work or our businesses responding? And I don't know. And I think you bring up a good question. How do we respond when businesses say no?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you're in your roles, you just have to, as much as maybe we don't want to, we almost feel like we're forced to continue to go this way. But then there's this group of people, and I will call out my own like younger generation, maybe not all of us, but we're willing to kind of look outside of where we're currently at and find those businesses that will be flexible. Because we recognize that our talents go beyond us showing up every day in person. It's the same output, the same work can show up every single day.
Yeah. That's such a good point, Sarah, that, you know, if organizations are not meeting people where they are, having these conversations, being flexible, not just with where you work, but in instances when you need mental health days or, you know, when things are going on, you know, if you're not flexing or if you're not updating your standards, right, on your policies, the way that you do work in your organization, then your workforce is just going to go and look somewhere else, right? They're going to go somewhere else.
I think to add to that too, I think, you know, Larry, you talk about the business case, you know, companies that put blinders on or people who put blinders on to this, they are the ones who will lose out.
Yeah.
When we talk about building a business case, they're the ones that are struggling. And I think that's where maybe it is the business case, but I also think it's part of the morality part as well, where we have to take personal responsibility to create our own awareness in these situations to see how we're contributing and where we're at and understanding what that looks like in our workspaces and other spaces as well.
Right. Yeah. And Sarah brought up a really good point too, just being able to, you know, organizations meet you where you are and allowing you to take time. Like I shared this with the group as we were prepping, but you know, in 2020, that was a really hard year for people, particularly Black Americans. In America, it was a very stressful time. I was very fortunate that I could work from home, that allowed me to work and consume everything that was happening in the space. And, you know, if you know me, you know, I'm optimistic. I smile a lot. I laugh a lot. And my personality continued right through work. But I remember we met every single day as a leadership team to talk about, you know, the impacts of what's happening with COVID and where we are and, you know, all of those things, right? And one day I remember our CEO sort of, you know, started the meeting off on like, how is everyone just doing with what's happening? And I shared with the group that it has been very difficult, not just for me, but even the brown and Black people that's working in our retail stores, right? They are, you know, in a restaurant, they're young people, right? Like they're early 20s. And I was in New York City. And so that's like the mecca of the marches that were happening and all of the things that are going on. And one thing that I told them is that it's been hard for me to be able to show up and talk about food and these products when real stuff is happening outside of what we're talking about. right? Like this is not really critical compared to what's happening outside. And I kind of shared my viewpoint, and it was just something where, you know, I had never shared it, you know, I hadn't brought it up. So there's really no way they would have known because they're not seeing me. I'm at home, right? And I'm not married, but it was just like a light bulb to be able to say, you know, oh, wow, I didn't realize that you were dealing with everything that's happening from a social standpoint in trying to show up at work with a smile on your face, still trying to help people. And then I wanted to share it because I wanted them to also think about the, you know, I say kids, you know, because they're much younger than me, but the early 20-year-olds that are working in our restaurants that are also struggling with what's happening. And that just reminds me of just the things that you all are saying, that organizations that's able to flex and give time and meet people where they are is so important. And to Jill's point, those are the organizations that's going to win.
Yeah, and what you mentioned, Tia, it makes me also think about that the CEO creates the safe environment, right? But we were talking from the very beginning, you know, that is part of what DEI should be aware is he creates a safe environment so you were able to open up about what you were feeling at that moment. And I think that is very important, that sometimes we just get dragged into the routines, right, that we have in meetings versus opening the meeting, saying how everybody feels.
Yeah. I remember when she brought that up, I literally had to go on mute because I started to cry. You know, like I had no idea I had those emotions even behind it. But having someone say, how are you all doing with all this? Like, let's stop talking about business for a minute. Let's stop talking about how COVID is impacting our business, right? Let's talk about how is all this that's going on impacting you as a person. So that was really impactful to me.
Yeah.
You know, in our last few minutes, I want to tackle a topic that Larry actually brought up early on, and it's around the skeptics of DEI. Whether or not DEI is this reverse discrimination or if it's racist. You know, Larry, you kind of talked about what you have heard people say about DEI. How would each of you address the skeptics of DEI? Or even how have you addressed the skeptics of DEI? I guess I should ask because I know, you know, at least one of you probably have addressed it before in the past.
I don't know if I've had to address it necessarily, but yeah, no, you know what? I don't know. That's not true. I think it's just, I mean, you need a diverse workforce, you know, if you're going to be successful. I think like Larry said, we need to make more of that case, you know, that business case, but I think you just need as many voices as possible in order to get the full spectrum of what's going on, right? I mean, in whatever it is, in a community, in a company, in a small, you know, work team. I don't know. That's a tough question.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to say, no, we don't want many different voices to contribute to, in our cases, right, a product that's going to go to many different types of people.
Well, right, exactly. I mean, and, you know, so many different types of people are going to consume your products or consume your media, or, you know, and it's just the idea of even, you know, switching industries, like you talk about, like TV or movies, like how important it is to see representation in those areas as well. You know, I don't know if that's, I don't know how strongly that makes the case for it, but like, it just seems like it should be logical.
Yeah.
So part of making the business case, business is about opportunity, you know, and being able to take advantage of an opportunity, take advantage of an opportunity for the benefit of your shareholders. And I think when you exclude people, you exclude an opportunity to understand an opportunity. If that makes sense, you exclude an opportunity to learn about an opportunity. If you don't engage with me and talk to me, you don't get my viewpoint, you don't get my thinking about how we might grow this business, an opportunity that I might see that's unique because of my unique set of life experiences and how I see the world before me.
Yeah.
So, an opportunity to learn about an opportunity that will help grow the business. This is what Indra Nooyi understood about inclusion. This is why inclusion is important. Inclusion is the foundation, if you will, for making the business case.
Yeah.
That DE&I is important.
Yeah.
Larry said what I was trying to say, but he said it way better. Thank you, Larry. I was stumbling around. If I'm not able to like write it down or type it out, I'm just useless.
No, it's good. It's good.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna say that what Larry and Jason was mentioning is also, for these people that doesn't believe in that, it's gonna be a result, because you can have all these programs and these initiatives internally in your company, but this has to connect with something, and I was saying at the very beginning, you need to set the soil. And the soil is going to be that environment that you set around in your organization in order for others to embrace and engage with the initiatives that you want to move along, right? But to Larry's point, you need to understand the needs. You need to identify opportunities to create new opportunities and so on. So it's how it goes. There is no other way. And whoever doesn't understand that is not going to see the opportunity that is there in front of them.
Yeah, they'll miss it.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mentioned yesterday that I play, like Damarys, maybe a little bit of a devil's advocate, where I'm trying to make a team of people, or amongst organizations, understand what's right in front of them. And kind of like Larry said, we're painting a picture that's already there. So we need to embrace it. We need to be willing to open up our minds and engage and be vulnerable and be open. And like Tia said, be where you are now to see that this is what is happening right in front of us. We have people who want to be heard, who have a message. And if we want to push back to the skeptics, we need to kind of present to them the data that's already out there and continue and continue and continue. And just be willing to kind of get that backlash once in a while. But if you believe in your message and set the soil, like Damarys said, then, we can get somewhere. We can do something.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And we know, right? Like, we know if your groups are not diverse. We can tell by
we can tell.
you put out, right? Like how many times you're like, oh yeah, like you're trying to talk to me as a Black woman, but I know you had no one Black. Read this or look at this or anything, so like we know if it's if you do not have that group around you.
Well,
one thing sorry.
I was just gonna say, even Larry, when you started with 82% of executives say DEI is important for this year, and then I would think about people who are skeptical, like, what's the fear behind not being inclusive?
Right. Yeah.
Like, what makes us think, gosh, that is a horrible idea to have people feel included?
Right.
And I mean, I guess I would kind of explore that, which I'm sure there's a whole lot of reasons, but I often think about how that comes back to like a sense of power. And like, what does it mean to include other people? Does it mean we really have to give something up? Or is it like the business case of we get more? It's those opportunities and to even know about opportunities. But, part of that is like, why wouldn't we want to be included? Yeah. Why wouldn't we want that?
Right. Yeah. Jason, you were going to add a comment?
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about, maybe to hear from Larry, earlier you mentioned this idea of these different cycles of affirmative action or DEI. And you go, you know, as long as you've been in the industry, you going through several of these cycles. Does this cycle, or have any of the cycles felt different, or do they feel the same, or do you see growth each time or progress?
Great question. Yes, that each one of them, each one of the cycles is different, and I think that, you know, so when, you know, this cycle is certainly different than the last one, and I think too that yes, we make progress each time. I think we learn each time, and we get better each time. Now this cycle, I was beginning to think that, you know, that this cycle was going to be a short one, a short run. And, you know, again, I was encouraged this morning when, you know, that 82% number gives me, you know, I'm encouraged to think that it might last a little bit longer than I had originally thought. I thought we were really, you know, with the pronouncements in the news and with the actions of the Supreme Court and the state actions at universities, I was, you know, thinking that, well, this cycle's coming to an end, and maybe we could do some, you know, some studies to say what did we learn. But Jason, you're right. We get better each time, and this cycle will end. Uh, I just, it's just not, maybe not tomorrow.
Yeah. I like that too, Larry. Like, you know, and I say it often when people get discouraged, is that progress is going to happen. It is happening. We're just living in the present, right? So we're feeling the ups and downs, but it's like your stocks, right? Or, you know, your retirement. If you're looking at it every single day, you're probably nervous, right? But if you're looking at it over time,
Right. Good one.
we feel pretty good about it. So it's one of those things where if you look at it over time, progress is happening and will continue to happen. Thankful to the younger generations that will continue to hold us accountable as they enter that workforce and being able to vote and being able to bring their own ideas and being able to learn, right? So that makes me hopeful.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank each of you for being here today and being a part of our panel. I know this topic is meaty and one that we hope to continue to have and continue to have conversations around and continue to focus on, because we want to be a part of the solutions. We want to be a part of these cycles that happen, right? A part of the progress that's happening in the food space, but also, you know, across the world. So thank you all for taking the time to be with us today, including our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Join.
Yeah.
And we will be back next week. We're here every single Wednesday at noon Eastern time talking about the real stuff, right? And how it impacts the work that we do each and every day and how it impacts our culture. So please join us next week and we will see you. We'll see you then.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.